Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming. This is At the Kitchen Table, which is my podcast for entrepreneurs and people to just discuss the things I like talking about.
Good.
This is my friend Kristin Walker. Kristin is with Essential Properties Realty Trust. You're a big dog over there. You're an SVP.
Correct. Internal Real Estate Counsel.
And so I've always just known you as my friend who does real estate law.
Yeah.
And so you're doing that for them.
Yes, I am. I use a lot of outside counsel help. So I was the outside counsel or one of the outside counsels. And now I kind of direct traffic and help with that.
So where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get here? How'd you come to this place in life?
Sure. So originally from Missouri, grew up there, went to college at Mizzou, got a business degree in finance and real estate, and then went straight to law school because I knew that I wanted to be an attorney. So went to law school at Mizzou and then started practicing at a regional firm in Kansas City, Missouri, right after I graduated. And I was kind of process of elimination as you're in law school, trying to figure out which areas you like and what you don't like. And I knew I didn't want to do litigation. And so when I was looking at transactional, I had some great mentors that did real estate work, commercial real estate work, and just kind of fell in love with it. So I was lucky enough to get hired right out of law school, started my practice in Kansas City, and was with that firm for about 6 years. And then at about that point, a partner who I worked with a lot approached me, and we talked about starting our own firm. So we started a boutique commercial real estate firm based out of Kansas City, but I was actually here in Colorado at the time. We had moved here in 2010, and it was before people really did a lot of remote work, which was funny. So I'd get a lot of comments about how much laundry I was doing every day, or was I watching TV all the time?
That's what they thought you were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which was hilarious because it was my husband and I was like, we don't have that much laundry. I don't know.
I didn't like TV. No.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. So my partner and I had a firm, and that worked out great because we had a young family at that time. And we did that for about 7 years and then decided to part ways. And I was looking for the next opportunity and went to a large law firm, Polsinelli, who's now in the AmLaw 100. So over 1,000 attorneys.
Wow.
And I was in their Denver office for about 3.5 years before my client approached me and asked if I'd consider moving in-house. And so that was really the first time that I hadn't been in private practice and have kind of switched to now more of a business role. So it's kind of the marriage of business and legal is what I'm doing, which is a lot of fun. And we've been in Colorado for 15 years now, which felt like it was kind of a quick decision to move here and thought we'd just be here for a little bit. And here we are.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because you and I have gotten together many times and just sat around and visited about raising kids and business and real estate, which we enjoy both kind of talking about. But, you're a particularly driven person. What is it that drives you? Like, where do you get your energy from?
I think the people around me, particularly, but I'm a doer. So I like to be doing things. I have a hard time sitting still. So I like to be busy. And I think it's one of the reasons that real estate speaks to me is because it's a very, the transactions, you can cross things off a to-do list. And I'm a big lister.
Well, and no two transactions are the same.
Right.
Even the scale and volume for which you practice, which is completely different than residential real estate. Yeah. The deals just aren't the same.
No. And that's the hard part is, there's no real rinse and repeat. It's very similar patterns and you see things through your experience that you can kind of use in your toolkit, but they're never the same. So, and even, I always say like a $1 million deal may cost me the same in legal fees as a $100 million $100 million deal. You just never know.
Right.
So it's, I just, I don't know. I'm a firstborn. So I always think that that's part of it. I think birth order plays a part in it, but I like to be busy. I like the analytical parts of real estate, but I also like the analytical parts of being a parent. So it's kind of both of those things. And it's fun for me to have my own thing going on while my kids have their own things going on.
Well, that's right. Yeah. It's interesting. I do think that, like, particularly somebody like you've set an example for your kids where, I mean, you're working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And we have three girls and a boy. And I think for my daughters to see, hey, you know, I have a mom who does both things, right? She parents, she's involved in my life, and she's working and has her own thing going on is good for them to see. And it's good for my son to see too, because one day he probably will have a spouse that is doing the same thing.
You know, it's interesting. You work in an industry that carries just like a lot of maybe masculine energy.
For sure.
And you're always lovely every time I see you. But, you know, I think there's a balance to actually working this sort of feminine job at home as mom, and then balancing this sort of masculine role in a high earning, high powered role.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that like?
It's interesting because it's, especially when I started practicing in 2006, and I would say in general, although the attendance for law school is about a 50-50 male-female split right now, in transactional, you see a lot of men. And so my first experiences as an associate were always being around a lot of male practitioners. And so kind of developing that thick skin and being able to roll with some of those punches, because they're definitely, I mean, 2006 doesn't sound like that long ago, but there were a lot of things, you know, that were said or just implied something sometimes that you just had to go with it. Yeah. And I don't mean that to say things were inappropriate.
Yeah.
But it just is different than now.
No, I think that's right. Yeah.
And so developing kind of that thick skin, but then also there's a particular skill that I still am working on about how to be authoritative and
like to match
demanding,
energy.
yes, without getting a bad rap. You know, because I think a lot of times when you say, especially in a negotiation, you're negotiating and you say, this is my position, and you, whatever your negotiation style is, if you are a woman, that can be interpreted in a different way than if a man maybe would say the same thing. It's been a challenge and an interesting one, but I also like the ability, I bring a different energy to the management table, right? So I manage a little bit differently than some of my male counterparts.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean I'm touchy-feely, because I'm not, but it just is a different consideration, I think. And then at home, it's kind of interesting because I do bring that feminine energy, but I also can be, you know, very hard.
Firm.
Yeah. Very firm with the kids. I mean, my husband and I are both just very consistent. And he's former military. So it's we have a style that works for us, but I definitely am the soft place for the kids, but I also I'm not a pushover.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's finding that balance.
Well, and it's one of my favorite things about you actually is like you and I have this interesting dynamic where I feel actually one of my favorite things about you is just your competence. I value like authenticity, competence, knowledgeable people. And so whenever we've gotten together, and we can kind of mastermind and talk and thought lead and do this kind of stuff, it's part of what I enjoy about our relationship. And also that you're raising what is by any measure today considered a large family.
Yeah.
And I just think you're doing a nice job of balancing your faith with your kids and this incredible career that has evolved for you. And I've enjoyed watching you step through those places. And so, but you know, it's interesting. I feel sort of that same sense about masculine and feminine energy in business because I work in real estate also. And I can get spun up and tend to sort of project, you know, sort of the sturdy energy.
Yeah.
And then I can catch myself and be like, oh, I can soften up a little bit or soften down.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes it takes other women to actually call me out on that.
Yeah.
To be like, whoa.
Like that's too aggressive. And actually, Charlie, my husband will say to me like, okay, you came in a little hot on that one because, you know, if we're, especially if we're meeting somebody for the first time, he will after the fact sometimes be like, okay, that was a lot for somebody to digest. You need to back it off a little bit, but it's, that's your personality, right? So your personality is what it is, but it is kind of knowing, you know, maybe tone it down.
Can you think of a time in your career, and maybe some of those like aha formative shifts in your career where you were just kind of structurally changed by either something that happened or a time in business that was really a defining point for you or a pivotal moment? What were those like, and how did you handle them?
Yeah. So the first things that come to mind are mistakes that you make, right?
Sure, always. Yeah.
I can think of the very first, well, not the very first, the biggest mistake I probably made on a contract once, and the way I felt when that happened. Mm-hmm. And it's probably been 10 years plus, and I still remember that. And so I gained a lot of empathy for, when I have attorneys come to me and say, hey, we just realized we made a mistake in a contract. Yeah. That has carried over. I think I was a lot more unapproachable probably before I made a mistake like that. Mm-hmm. But you learn as time goes on, you will get through it. You will fix the mistakes. And they feel worse, and you go to that place of the world's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And so just kind of getting that empathy. The other thing I will say is having kids. So I remember being a young associate, and we had some other female associates in the office. And I thought to myself, why can they just not get here on time? What is what is the problem? Like and then I had my own kids, and I'm like, oh, hold on a second. I understand what's going on. So those life moments of, having a baby or having a sick kid or a problem at home, I always, I heard some advice recently, and they were saying you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. And I was like, isn't that the truth, right? Because you're spinning on something, even if, it maybe isn't that big of an issue.
I have a girlfriend who, when she and I had little babies in the Primrose parking lot, we would just get in the car and sit together and talk, because she was a fancy pants and I was a fancy pants, and we were in our outfits all dressed up to go to work, except that we both just needed time to decompress.
Yeah.
And I remember we would sit in the Primrose parking lot and talk sometimes before we went into the office. But we called them the look away years. And she even made me a little gold bar necklace that said, on one side it had my kid's name, and on the other side it said look away. And they were those years where it's like you walk into the office late, mm-hmm. and you need another woman in your life to just look away.
Yeah.
I've got a sick kid, or I am as unhappy as my unhappiest child, or as happy as my unhappiest child. And I think those are important. Well, they're such important years for professional women.
Yes.
I think one of the greatest gifts this spot in time has given you and I is the tailwind of, call it the feminist movement, whatever you want to call that, has given a place for you and I to be these successful business women, mm-hmm. and also to have large families at home.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's the greatest time to be a professional woman ever.
Yeah.
That I can do both.
Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's not always pretty. That's what I have to tell, people are like, oh, you're so organized or whatever. And I'm like, listen, it's a balance. One thing is always taking the priority, and the other thing is lagging a little bit. And then it goes back and forth. I always told, to your point, young female attorneys, especially, because the timing is so hard, right? You get out of law school, you start working, you really need to grind for those first 5, 6, 7 years to get the experience to let your career take off. Yeah. Those end up being the same time that you are able to have babies.
Or pick a mate. Yeah. To choose the person you're going to spend your life with. You're drowned in work in some New York law firm.
Yeah.
I've heard this story 1,000 times, right?
Yeah. And so I always just would say, just put one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. Just keep going. Because the number of times that I thought to myself, I had a friend, and she's also a real estate attorney, and we would get on the phone probably about once a week and brainstorm of what else could we do that would be better than what we're doing right now, because this feels so hard. Yeah. And we would be like, we're going to start and not an app, because apps weren't a thing, because we all had Blackberries back then, a website, and we would make your menus for you. Or we're going to go into estates and trusts because that seems easier and people aren't as needy. But then we were like, well, people die all the time, so that's probably not also great.
We're trying to solve it.
So we would try to always figure something out. But the just hanging in there and keeping going, even when it's not pretty.
Oh, for sure.
Is probably the best thing I ever did for myself, because it would have been so easy, or so much easier, I thought, to say, I'm just going to step out for a while. Mm-hmm. but that's hard, you know, so you make choices, but I always just say, keep going. The other thing that I think is for us sitting here now that was different, you know, than our parents probably, is our husbands are very
hands-on.
Like, the most important decision I ever made was who I married.
Well,
right?
yes. There's a saying, it says 90% of life's happiness and misery hangs on one decision, and it's who you marry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if my husband wasn't supportive of me doing what I'm doing,
You wouldn't be here.
No.
We wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be the women we are.
No.
The parents, the business acumen, all of it without
that support. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey being a woman in real estate, but I also really like it. I like that it's a little bit of I bring a different thing to the table than a lot of the guys that I work with.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's interesting. I've often said, well, I jokingly, going back to like your 20s and the BlackBerry days, like 20s and 30s, I made a lot of maybe unintentional business decisions then that I didn't realize were going to serve me so well now.
Yeah.
You know, things like we bought, you know, a couple little rental properties, which felt like lifting the earth at the time.
Sure.
You know, all of those little decisions that we made then have brought this sense of peace now to this place of life where your kids are getting big and they're busy and they don't drive. And then when they do, that's like a whole nother fear.
Right.
And so it's interesting, like having come through where I'm at now, I sort of jokingly say all the money I made in my 20s and 30s. Your 40s aren't for making money. Yeah. Your 40s are for spending money. Like,
right.
Between registrations and, you know, kid stuff and just my life now, the amount of, you know, staff, the business that we've brought, you know, up, and all the decisions I've made, like,
yeah,
my 40s are for abundance and for just making sure everybody around me is kept.
I think that's right. I think you also, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is risk taking. And you were taking risks when you were doing those things. And now looking back, they don't feel like maybe that big of a risk, but those risks add up to a confidence level to allow you to take bigger risks later. And so
they accumulate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I left Big Law and went in-house with the client, that was a risk, right? Because I was changing my career. What I had always done, I was deciding to do a new thing. Yeah. But the confidence of, okay, listen, I've taken these other risks along the way and they've mostly panned out, was what propelled me into that, to being able to take that next step forward, which has been great. I mean, it's been wonderful. Right. But I didn't know at the time that it was going to be that way. Nobody could have said it's going to be perfect.
Well, and I mean, you've made a few career moves, and some of those were just opportunistic, right?
Yeah.
And some of them were probably necessities.
Yeah.
Just the pressures of a certain role. Sometimes it's nice to be like, I'm ducking out. I got to go do something else.
Or a partnership that doesn't work out, right?
Sure, that's
I mean, that's one of those where it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing? You know, this doesn't feel like it's working, but do you stay or do you go? And so kind of having that confidence, and even, you know, moving, right?
And those are all risks too.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting a firm when I was 31 and had 6 years of legal experience, that's a risk.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know where the paycheck was going to come from necessarily, but worked out.
You just took a bet on yourself. I always say the grass is green wherever you water it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking back on some of your mentors or some people who were, you know, get good at giving you advice along the way, whether recently actually or in your past, do you have a couple pieces of advice for, you know, entrepreneurs or young business working moms? What would some of your best pieces of advice be?
Yeah. So I think the first one, you know, that comes to mind, and I had spoken with some of the attorneys, like female attorneys that I know that are really successful, was to just keep going. Because the ones that, you know, I have a group of friends that we all went to law school together. We were all oddly practicing in the same field, and we all have families. And there were a lot of days where it just wasn't pretty, and it was just hang in there and keep going.
Yeah, that's right.
And see it through. The other one, you know, just recently I had a mentor and we meet, and it was funny. I was kind of at a decision point, and she was like, you have to just make a decision. She was like, whether your decision is to do the thing you're thinking about or not do the thing that you're thinking about, make the decision one way or another so that you're not just, you know, kind of out there floating in the abyss.
Well, that's right. Well, because And it's each decision along the way, big or small, sometimes just executing on the decision. Stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. You know what you've weighed it out.
Sure.
Now make a decision.
Yeah. You just have to go one way or another.
I do think that is a key to success.
Yeah.
Is just make a decision and go.
Absolutely. And once you've done it, then you're in it, right? Like go forward, don't go back and second guess it all the time.
Yeah, sure.
I do think that's important. So those are two of them. The other thing, I think that there is some wisdom that you get in kind of the trial by fire situation. And so, I have some relatively young colleagues that work for me, and we just went through the review period, and I was trying to get some of my managers to give them a little bit more authority. And instead of micromanaging, I was really trying to push them to let them fail on their own.
Yeah.
Like the failures that you experience are what gives you the wisdom to do better. But if somebody stops you, it's like your kids, right? If I stop my kid every time from falling off the bike, they're never going to learn what it feels like to fall off the bike. And so they're not going to course correct on their own. Yeah. And so you've got to just let people, have that authority and learn it on their own. And whether that's looks good or it looks bad, that's how you learn.
It's so interesting you say that. I was just having this conversation yesterday. I look back on the early years from my mentor and the people who were training me in the business. And there is no doubt that there were a few key opportunities of just figuring shit out.
Yeah.
I remember my dad went in 2003. I had started in the business in May, and my mom and dad had a 1 week or a 10-day trip to the Cayman Islands. But this was before there was no Wi-Fi.
You couldn't, right? Yeah.
You weren't, if you were leaving on vacation,
you were gone.
You were gone.
Yeah.
And I think he had 11 deals under contract or something. And he left me. I'd been in the business 6 weeks. I'd been around for a long time, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And he left me with 11 files in all stages of wherever they were at under contract, and negotiating inspections and putting deals under contract and taking listings and getting paperwork signed and all this stuff. And, looking back on that time, his absence and my, the requirement to figure it out was in fact one of the best things that ever happened for me. Was and now I sometimes feel like I should just leave and go on vacation when I have sort of a blossoming agent or somebody here who's trying to learn a hard thing. Sure. It's almost here it is. They're not going to mess it up because, they care so much about getting it right. And I have to just trust that if I can go away, sometimes they're going to grow in a remarkable way.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, that's parenting advice and work advice, right? Yeah.
At our house, we call it message to Garcia, because there's a Marine story about, somebody who had to go figure it out, basically. And so we will use that phrase a lot of times with our kids when they come and say, well, how do I this or that or whatever, message to Garcia. You figure it out on your own. Yeah. Yeah. But I do think, to your point, that is you probably still remember the panicky feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I think that's good for people to have that panicky feeling. We want to save them a lot of times from that, because you remember that it didn't feel great, but having to go through that and having the anxiety of, how did that feel and how do I get ahead of it next time is really how you learn best.
I have just a couple more questions and then we can wrap up, but I'm super interested right now. I've been paying attention to AI.
Okay.
And sort of some of the arguments that are happening around the legal field.
Yeah.
There's all these people who are well, AI is not going to be able to give you legal advice anymore. And I'm well, then what's it good for?
Right.
And so I wonder, have you contemplated, it's a bit of a big question and you can answer it as broadly or small as you like, but where do you think the legal industry goes with people being able to sort of get a lot of, with the large language models and the sort of agentic AI and sort of some of that's coming? I wonder, how do you see the role of a legal professional, particularly somebody who's got a vast knowledge base that took you 25 years or whatever to build?
Yeah.
That so can be replaced with AI and not replaced, but and that's how I feel about my business too. No, you can't replace the knowledge that you have.
Right.
But it took you 25 years to get here, and AI can zip up a will in 7 seconds or whatever. It's where does this go?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges, right? But from a So I guess the first part I'll answer is from a learning perspective. I think about it from young associates going right out of law school, because you get out of law school and you know nothing. Yeah. I mean, really. Yeah. It's just like any other education you get, you're not trained really on the job. So there's a very steep learning curve. And especially in transactional work where we see AI drafting documents, and even, hey, I'll take, the comments that you've made or a partner has made to a document and be able to put those into another document or imply those. That's very dangerous because you're not then learning, I've probably read, I don't know how many thousands of leases. And so then I understand what the norm looks like, what's market for a certain provision. And I understand the compromise positions. But if I use an AI model and it goes and puts all those things in, and I don't really have to read it anymore, and I don't have to critically think about what is being put in, I don't learn it.
Yeah, that's
right. So
I'm
very concerned about the education piece. But then the follow-up to that is, do they need that education, right? Because if you can reproduce the information that is known, then maybe you wouldn't need to have that background anymore. Where I think it gets really tricky is, the negotiation. I don't think you're going to see AI to AI negotiation, right? So
a couple of bots fighting it out.
Right, exactly. So there still has to be that human element of the give and take. And I worry, or I don't worry, I don't think you can replace the good negotiators and their styles that they bring to the table, and also kind of those compromises. Like AI could give you a list of what those are, but it doesn't necessarily, and kind of setting aside the agentic AI stuff, because that may change the equation a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where you need to end up, because it's not, as we talked about earlier, every deal is so different. So every tenant that we're negotiating with, or every seller that we're negotiating with, has a different set of concerns and major issues. One may be very concerned about, are they going to be able to go dark in their space? While another may be very concerned about, how do I assign, this lease in the future to somebody else who takes over the business? It's hard for AI to predict and work through those issues. So I do think there's still a need. Now, is there efficiency that can be gained? Absolutely. Yeah. And, especially when you see billable rates increasing significantly, really, every year. Do we need to take away some of those tasks that they are spending, $600, $1,000 an hour on, that could be replaced? Yeah, we do, because we need to bring that model back and make it a little bit more efficient. And we're seeing a lot of developments, especially in real estate. Yeah. That AI can do and help things move along faster without having the human touch on it, which is the expensive part.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I definitely am noticing in my business too, that you just have to use AI as the tool, but it doesn't replace the brain, right? Well,
absolutely.
And it can't make me soft either. That's the one thing I worry about, is like, you can't just plug something in, not read it, not type. If you don't type it and you don't make it, you don't retain it.
Right. Absolutely.
And so that's a problem.
Yes.
And so I do worry that, we may rely on it here at a time where it sort of seems accessible to us. And then I worry the industry gets a little soft. And then sort of ultimately what I think happens is that there's just going to be a whole lot less of us, maybe a whole lot less real estate attorneys, and maybe a whole lot less real estate salespeople. I just think you're going to have this pinnacle of people at the top who are excellent at giving the advice or negotiating the deal. And the tool will be how it gets done, essentially.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly know what that looks like. I'm sort of having a hard time getting more than 6 months or a year in front of me. And I feel like when I was a younger person, I could vision cast a little further out. I could see the future in 5 or 10 years. And I don't know why I'm struggling to really, and I'm a visionary type person, like to get further away. And I think some of it is the unknown that this all brings.
Yeah. I think that's true. And it's kind of like all these promises that AI make, are those all going to come to fruition? Right? Because we hear all these great things, but is that actually going to pan out the way that they think that it will? And I do think there's a little bit of a bubble for all these products. Yeah. The other thing I worry about though is back to your point of having a few people who really know a lot of stuff, is if you don't start with the building blocks, you don't necessarily understand the issues. And I worry that we're going to have people who don't understand the issues. Oh. And so they don't know how to think through and do the analysis.
This is a huge problem in my industry already. And I sort of blame like transaction coordinators. Mm-hmm. So when I was in the business, I had to come in and do the whole deal from the start to the finish, the whole thing. I had to learn the whole business. Yeah. Now we have this industry where people come into the business and we've all like made a feather bed for them. Like we give them transaction coordinators and marketing coordinators, right. And we give them AI assistants. We give them all this stuff, but they're not becoming a whole agent.
Yes. Yeah.
They're becoming this like fractional agent that just knows like a part of the deal because they had all this feather bed help.
And if you don't have to see it through, you don't get the experience necessarily of here are all the pitfalls of where this could fall apart, right? Or did you think about this? If you've never done it, you don't think about it.
Well, right.
And so I do think that that's an issue, and I see it even with the kids, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're, if they're doing a lot of their research and homework, like it's a great tool to use, but if you don't actually understand the information that it's producing for you and you're just plugging it into something, you are not gaining the analytical skills that you're going to need.
I do worry about this next generation for just that reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just wondered, are they going to teach AI in school? What is there to teach? I don't know. I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But.
The other issue we run into a lot, and I'm actually dealing with right now, is I think that the common person off the street who's using AI, like a chat GPT, does not understand the confidentiality issues that arise from that. Because I know internally at Essential Properties, one of the conversations we've been having is when you plug in a lease or you plug in some underwriting information, where is that going?
Yeah.
And if that's going into a model for other people to use, you have potentially just breached a lot of confidentiality provisions that you've already entered into with other tenants or sellers or whoever it could be.
Sounds like the attorneys will continue to have work to do.
Yes. Yeah. On the litigation front, which is not me, but it is kind of I think people's awareness of what information are they feeding in is trickling down slowly, but it's been an interesting development because in talking to some of the, 20-year-olds, different people that I work with, they aren't necessarily understanding how the information that they are putting in is being used, right? And where it's going and who has access to it now.
What are our kids going to do when they grow up?
It's a totally different, it's kind of like the phones, right? It's a totally different world that they're going to have to navigate, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think the best things we can do are to teach them to think for themselves. Mm-hmm. And ask those questions of well, why do you think this? And have opinions and really understand who they are. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's going to be a lot of the challenge is, can you easily just, get an AI answer and put that onto your, or have AI write your book report, right? And you turn that in.
Sure, you can do that.
You can do that. Mm-hmm. Is that
just won't
honest?
Take you very far.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's the underlying parenting is more important necessarily than use this tool or don't use this tool. Those kinds of challenges. So it'll be interesting to see.
What's next for you?
Well, end of year right now, end of fourth quarter. So at Essential Properties, we're publicly traded. So every end of quarter is a big deal, and especially the end of the year. So this is always my busiest time. And then next year, looking at leaning into some more management endeavors at the company, doing more training, doing more hiring. We're in growth mode. And
you like that stuff?
I do. Yeah. I love mentoring. Mm-hmm. I think it's a lot of fun because I like to see the growth in people. Mm-hmm. And just kind of those aha moments when they start to get it is a lot of fun. And then selfishly, it also helps, on my day-to-day, right? Like if I train somebody how to do something or I teach them how to do it and they can take a little bit off my plate to where I can focus on things that are kind of higher and better uses of my time. Yeah. It's a win-win. So a lot of that in the next year, and I'm excited. I think 26 is going to be a bigger year for all things, and maybe some of the craziness that we've had will subside. So we'll see.
Thanks for coming.